And Simon.
So today is episode 3 of our podcast, which is very exciting for us to still be going. So in the last episode, we talked about nicotine dependence and breaking the cycle. So if you've not watched that, please go and have a watch. We talked about how nicotine affects the body physically, but smoking is not just about nicotine. It's also about routine and habits and behaviours, and there's an emotional side to it. So it's much more complex than just the nicotine. So that's what we're going to be discussing in today's episode. We're going to be looking at triggers, cravings, and distracting methods and techniques.
Perfect. So one of the most common questions, or what we normally discuss in our sessions, are these triggers. We talk about triggers quite a lot in our session. So what are these triggers exactly? What are we talking about when we talk about these triggers in smoking?
Yeah, such a good point. We throw the term triggers around all the time, but what exactly is that? What does that mean? So a trigger is essentially anything that makes you think, I want to smoke. So triggers can include places, people, feelings, time of day, routines, even thoughts. There's just so many things that can trigger that thought in a person of, I want to smoke, I want to have a cigarette. So the important thing to remember, though, that a trigger is not a command. It's not something you have to act on. It is simply a reminder of an old habit.
Yeah. So basically, triggers are different with each individual. Your triggers could be different to mine. Yeah, perfect.
Absolutely. That's such a good point, because what I'm going to talk about now is the most common types of triggers. And like you say, there's a variety of triggers and it is different for everyone.
Yeah.
So a very common one that we hear from people is the morning routine.
Yeah.
Just the morning itself can trigger a very strong craving to smoke. A lot of people tell us that the first cigarette on the morning is the most difficult to let go of. And it makes sense, because you've been all night without smoking. So your body is physically depleted of the nicotine that we've talked about in the past. So it means that the brain is making really strong associations between that first cigarette, because it's wanting all that nicotine, but then it makes the association with your morning routine. And again, even the morning routine can look different for everyone. So for some people, it's as soon as they wake up, the first thing they do is smoke. For other people, it's the drink that they have, whether it's coffee, tea. They've made that association of that specific drink goes hand in hand with a cigarette. Even just the act of flicking the kettle on can be the prompt, the trigger. After breakfast is another one. So people often say meals. So breakfast, as soon as that's done, that's when I have my cigarette. The commute to work as well, whether that's walking to the bus stop or in the car, if it's a long journey, that might be when people smoke. So another one is stress and frustration. Stress, I'd say, is one of the biggest triggers, and a lot of people, if they've quit smoking and then they relapse, I'd say 9 times out of 10 it's, I went through something really stressful and that's what led me back to smoking. And many smokers use cigarettes as a way, if they're feeling stressed, to calm down, to pause, to escape. It's a distraction. So if say you were stressed at work, as an example, just the act of stepping outside and taking 5 minutes to have a cigarette, it's just that time away, isn't it? That time for yourself, that pause. But what we find is that smoking obviously doesn't resolve the issue of stress. It's literally just act as a distraction in that moment. And it ultimately just reinforces that connection of, when I'm stressed, I have a cigarette. Social situations.
Of course.
Another really common one.
That's one of the common ones, the social ones,
Yeah, absolutely. So because of social situations, people associate it with alcohol. So just the act of having an alcoholic drink, again, people say, they go hand in hand. It's such a strong connection between them. It doesn't have to be socialising on a night out with alcohol. It can just be being with other smokers. So if you have lots of friends and family that smoke, that's going to be quite challenging. Work breaks, so if your colleagues smoke and you go out with them, it's tough, because it's not always about the cigarette itself. It can be the ritual and the social aspect of it as well. A lot of people say to us, it's such a social thing that I do if I know other smokers. Boredom is another big trigger. So smoking often fills these little empty spaces throughout the day. So if you're waiting for something, you know, if you're driving a long distance, if you're taking a break, if you're scrolling, people often say smoking fills something, it's something to do.
Yeah.
And I had a client recently that said, when I'm waiting for the kettle to boil, I always smoke a cigarette. And it's just to fill that time. And it's so interesting that it's not a long period of time, but she'd still got into that habit of, I smoke a cigarette when I'm waiting for something. And without cigarettes, it can feel really unfamiliar in those moments. So I've had people describe to me feeling lost. Like once they've quit smoking, you suddenly have a lot more time on your hands and you just feel lost and think, I don't know what to do with myself anymore because smoking took up so much time. Yeah, like, it's a big adjustment. What do I do? Emotional triggers. Another big one. So some people smoke when they feel sad, anxious, lonely, angry, but even positive emotions as well. If you're excited, if you're happy, some people describe it as a reward or a celebration. So there's a big range of emotions there that can potentially trigger the urge to smoke a cigarette. And a lot of people find that's quite a strong connection because the brain's learn, when I feel this, I then smoke a cigarette. And it starts to think, I can only cope in these situations if I smoke a cigarette, which is not the case. So a helpful mindset shift is, instead of saying, I need a cigarette in those moments, it's try saying, I've been triggered. So by just changing the wording of it and that mindset, it's a small change, but it makes a big difference, and it puts some distance between like the feeling that you're experiencing and the action of smoking a cigarette.
That was quite insightful in the sense that, like I said before, we talk about these triggers quite a lot in our sessions, and we always urge our clients just to try and identify the main triggers for them to want to have a cigarette. So when you were explaining it, it kind of made sense, because it's what causes these triggers and what actually, like we talked before, to say everyone is different. Your triggers could be different to mine. I really understood it. So now going forward, since we've talked about the triggers, one of the most common things that we always talk about in our sessions are the cravings. So most people talk about the cravings, and they always, probably you might ask, what is a craving? How do I identify when I have a craving? So basically the simple answer for these cravings is, it's just an urge to want to have a cigarette. That feeling that you have to say, oh, I really need a cigarette right now. So cravings can feel quite different with individuals. There can be physical cravings, there can be mental cravings, and there can also be emotional cravings, or all three of them at the same time. So they show up like you were talking about anxiety and everything. Cravings also show up as restlessness, irritation at times, tension is one of the common one. Obsessive thoughts, feeling like something is missing, like something is missing today. So those are what we call cravings. So one thing that I also need to point out to most people that smoke is that a craving is not a permanent feeling. It's actually a temporary feeling that you feel at that moment when you feel like you want to have a cigarette. But at that moment as it's happening, it feels intense. So intense that you feel like the world is going to stop now. But they do pass. That's the good thing about the cravings. They do pass. And they come in waves sometimes, or most of the times, they come in waves, these cravings. They rise at times, they have a peak, and then it fades away. The problem is that when people who smoke during a craving, the brain learns something. So your brain kind of associate things. So you just have a craving, and then you want to have a cigarette, and then you associate that with relief. So it's a craving, a cigarette, and then relief. That's how most people do it. And then that keeps the cycle going, like what we discussed when we were talking about the nicotine addiction cycle. So it's more like a cycle. You have a craving, and then you have a cigarette, and then you have that relief after having a cigarette. So one of the more, like I said, it's one of the important things that we need to identify is that it's just temporary. It's not a permanent thing. So why do we experience cravings, or why do people who smoke have these cravings? The simple answer is you are just experiencing what we call nicotine withdrawal. That is basically what's happening at that moment. That feeling that we call a craving is basically nicotine withdrawal. So what happens when you smoke, your body gets used to nicotine. At some point, when you don't have that cigarette, your body will recognize that the nicotine is missing. That's when you start to have the craving. So it can cause you to do a lot of things when you have a craving. You may find you're irritable. Irritability is one of the common signs of a craving. Restlessness, mood changes most of the time, tension, and sometimes brain fog as well. That's what normally happens. And sometimes when you do experience this, even though you are a smoker, sometimes your body is not asking for nicotine. That's the thing. It's just your brain which is expecting a cigarette. So that's what normally happens. Actually, the body is not asking for nicotine. It's just your brain expecting a cigarette because it feels a certain way, because it's been the routine, like what we were talking, craving, cigarette, and then relief. So it becomes a routine. When we come to our sessions, we don't only just provide nicotine, but we also do what we call behavioral support. And one of the most common tools that we use is what we call distracting methods or techniques. This is where all this mind, when you tell your mind to say this is just a craving, so it's part of what we call distracting method and techniques. So what we normally say is when a trigger or craving hits, it helps to have a plan. So this is where when you come to our sessions, we talk about that plan that we have with you just to help you stop smoking. So again, it's not just motivation that helps, though it's not just motivation, it's not just willpower, it's a real plan that you have to have. So we'll talk about a few practical distracting methods or techniques that can help when you do have the triggers and the cravings as well. So the most common one is, like we said, a craving lasts about 5 minutes. So we have this technique that we call a 5-minute delay. So basically, instead of telling yourself that, I'm going to have a cigarette, just try and just wait for 5 minutes before you have it. Just try and keep yourself busy. Try find something that's going to keep your mind away from just thinking about having a cigarette. Like we said, it's just a habit and a routine for you. So there's that 5-minute wait. And then also, what we also talk about is a change of environment. You did mention about it, like especially for those early morning cigarettes. So if you normally have a cigarette, let's say first thing in the morning, you go outside, have a cigarette, but you don't smoke indoors. So rather than change the environment, rather than going outside, just stay indoors. So one of the most common ones again that we talk about is like when a craving hits, try and move. It helps just to move. Get up, leave the room that you're in, step outside, wash your face, just doing a quick task that's going to keep your mind occupied in those 5 minutes when you do have those cravings. The other thing as well that we normally talk about, especially when you have these cravings or the triggers, is especially something to do with your hands. Because normally when you smoke, you use your hands quite a lot more. So smoking is often tied to that hand-to-mouth movement, that hand-to-mouth habit. So with that, as part of our distracting methods, we always say, try chewing gum. Having some mints as well does help. Drink cold water. So a stress ball does help as well. Toothpicks, they do help. Sunflower seeds, some have said they do help, and then some snacks as well. But with the snacks as well, we always say try and adopt a healthy habit as well, because we've often had most people say I've stopped smoking and then I've put on weight.
Yeah, it's too easy to go for the sweets and the chocolate and the crisps, isn't it? So it's things like carrot sticks, isn't it? Healthy snacks,
grapes and stuff like that.
That's really fab that you've gone through all those distraction techniques. I think they're so helpful. I think a lot of people, when they're quitting smoking, it's obviously completely natural to get the cravings and the thoughts to smoke. And a lot of people think, I cannot get through this. It's such an uncomfortable feeling, and it is. It can be really intense and it can be really uncomfortable. And people feel helpless and think, I cannot cope with this. The only way to get through is to smoke a cigarette. So it's really reassuring to know that, like you say, it's temporary. It's not the rest of your life. It is, a craving will come and it'll go, it'll come, it'll go, and it is temporary. And it's giving yourself that power and that confidence to say, I can get through this. I just distract myself. I won't use one of those techniques and I'll successfully get through it.
Yeah. And just as a way, just to end everything, it's like, just to remember, just to sum up what we were talking about, just triggers are normal. Cravings are temporary. You don't need to act to every urge to want to have a cigarette. So distraction is not weakness, it's a strategy actually. So what we can advise you, if you're having any issues and if you want to speak to one of our advisors, these are the contact details. Just speak to one of our advisors and then sign up to our services, and we'll be more than happy just to help you with your quit plan.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's everything for today. So,
so from us today, we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank
See you
so
later.
much. Bye.